So y'all, going back to that dark night out here in the North Atlantic Ocean, there was a problem. Had broken and come apart and ended up
Not going to be easy, actually.
Stephen King once said, "There is no harm in hoping for the best as long as you are prepared for the worst." Well, setting off on a passage across the mighty North Atlantic Ocean and hoping nothing breaks on your boat certainly is hoping for the best. Murphy's Law says what can go wrong will go wrong. And when you are out in the middle of the mighty deep blue North Atlantic Ocean with no land for hundreds and hundreds of miles in any direction, and something goes wrong, it can become an all-out emergency in seconds. Emergencies at sea are extremely serious. You can't just call 911 or a mechanic or a repairman. Help, even if it existed, would be days or even weeks away depending upon where you are. So when cruising out at sea, you have to be extremely self-sufficient and self-reliant. The number one key to dealing with any emergency at sea is to stay calm. If you have a helmet fire, your brain turns to mush, you can't think clearly, and you might even panic or freeze. That certainly doesn't help you solve the problem. So first and foremost, you have got to stay calm no matter what. Then you have to assess what's going on. Then you have to come up with a plan. Then you have to take direct action, stay focused, and do it. Henry Ford once said, "Whether you think you can or you can't, either way you are right." So y'all, there is no problem that can't be solved if we simply put our minds to it and do it. So now let us tell you about a real emergency with our rigging that occurred in the middle of the night out here in the North Atlantic Ocean. So y'all, going back to that dark night out here in the North Atlantic Ocean, it was during shift change, and before Amber went down to get some rest, we decided we needed to tack. And as part of that process, we were going to roll in our Genoa, since it's roller furl. And in order to roll in our Genoa, I release this clutch, and then I pull the line in, which rolls the Genoa around as Amber releases the sheet on the other side. Well, on this particular dark night in question, what happened was I released the clutch, Amber released the sheet, I went to furl in the Genoa, and it was locked. Even with the clutch open and even with the sheet released on the other side, the roller would not roll. It wouldn't furl. There was a problem. We didn't immediately know what the problem was, but we had to go forward and figure it out. And we had to figure it out quick because, y'all, we had out about 95% of our Genoa, almost a full Genoa. We had like one wrap left on the furler. The rest of it was out. That's significant because out here in the North Atlantic, anything can happen. You can come up on a squall or a storm, and before you know it, with that much sail area out, you could end up overpowered and the boat could get out of control in a hurry. So Amber sheeted the Genoa back in tight so the sail wasn't flogging and flapping in the wind. I secured the furling line back with a clutch, so we knew we had a real problem, and we knew if we didn't get that sail in, it could turn into a real emergency real fast. So we had to go forward and assess the situation and try to figure out what was going on. Now that we're up front here on the bow next to our Furlex unit that controls the Genoa, we'll be popping in clips to show y'all what was unfolding that night. After I got up here, I was able to manipulate the furling line enough to see that inside the roller furler, there developed an override situation. And an override situation is when the parts of the line override other parts, and they actually create a loop that binds the line and creates a block. Now, I wasn't able to determine immediately what caused the override. So I knew in order to figure out what caused the override, and more importantly, to be able to get to the actual override, to get the override undone so that we could use our furler line to get the Genoa furled in, I had to start taking the furler apart. Now, I'd never taken a Furlex apart in my entire life, but my grandmother always said, necessity is the mother of invention. And when you're out here in the middle of the ocean and you don't have any other options, you figure it out.
It's not going to be easy, I can totally assure you.
With Amber helping hold the lights and hand me tools as needed, I very carefully started taking apart the cover on the roller furler, these pieces here, one screw at a time. Losing screws out here in the middle of the ocean would have been another disaster, because then we wouldn't have been able to put it all back together once we fixed the problem. After I got the Furlex cover apart, I was then able to see all the furling line inside the furler, and I noticed that there was a black plastic roller that was wrapped up inside the line, and that had caused the override, which then caused the whole furler to lock up. What we soon discovered was that our actual furler lead roller block had broken and come apart and ended up dislodged inside the furler. And this is the furling lead roller block right here. This roller piece here had actually came apart from the base and ended up inside the furling unit itself. Fortunately, we did have a spare on board and were able to take this old part off and replace it with a new furler lead. We still had the full sail out, y'all. There's a lot of pressure from the wind on a sail, so we tried to keep the boat off the wind as much as we could to relieve all the pressure on the sail. Then I was able to manipulate the override enough that I was able to operate the furler by hand and sit here and hand furl the entire Genoa in.
The blue line.
Give you some slack?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it.
Okay.
At this point, the override had been freed. However, in the process of getting the override undone, the furling line had become completely fouled around the base of the furler and the chain plate. With 95% of the big Genoa hung out in the wind and a fouled furling line in weather conditions that were starting to deteriorate, this critical situation became an emergency at sea. The big Genoa had to be brought in, and the only way to do it, sitting at the base of the fouled furler, was to haul the sail in by brute force and sheer determination. It sure as heck wasn't easy, but failure was not an option. The big sail was hauled in, one screaming heave at a time.
what I just witnessed you do.
First thing we had to do was secure the sail rolled around the furler so that it wouldn't unfurl itself. Then we had to, by hand, take all the furling line off the furler and then feed the roller block that it came off, feed it all the way off the entire length of the line. Then we had to install the new spare roller lead block that we had and feed all of the line back around the furler. We had to load the furler by hand, running the line literally length by length up and down the boat by hand in the middle of the night out here in the rolling sea, and get the line back on the furler and then get it loaded back through the lead block and all the other roller blocks back to the clutch. And y'all, it took us literally about 6 or 7 hours to deal with that emergency, but we stayed calm, we worked together, we stayed focused, and we solved the problem. Tela was back in business, and we carried on our way to the Azores. All right, y'all, so there's the story of our emergency out here in the middle of the North Atlantic. If y'all have ever been out at sea and had an emergency, let us know down in the comments what it was and how you dealt with it. And also, y'all, remember, we post 2 videos every week, so be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see y'all next time on Sailing Tela.